The year 2020 has been a truly unique one to say the least. The onslaught of a global pandemic, coupled with closure of economic activity, a distance in social interaction, and workplaces moving online, have brought about a wave of change in how we operate. In these difficult times, CSR emerged as a true hero, whether it be providing immediate relief to the last mile or shifting sales to meet the need of the hour. Our social responsibility efforts have contributed hugely to the well being of the nation. While the initial few months were a period of trial and error, it is now pertinent to reflect, rethink, and revamp our priorities to chart the future course of CSR. So, join us today as we explore the changing nature of CSR and philanthropic projects. To moderate this session, I would like to invite Ms. Tushara Shankar, Head CSR and External Relations at Reckitt Benckiser. Ms. Shankar has a master's in social work from TIS Mumbai with a specialization in urban and rural community development. She has 17 years of diverse experience with corporate entities, international nonprofit, and consulting organizations. She's been associated with many bilateral, multilateral, UN and government programs in monitoring and evaluation roles and has been instrumental in formulating CSR policy, strategy, and leading implementation in the corporates that she has worked with. Lovely to have you here, Ms. Shankar. Our first speaker for this session is Mr. Saurabh Singh, President of the ICICI Foundation. Mr. Singh is the president of the Foundation for Inclusive Growth. In his capacity as the president, he is responsible for ensuring that the activities of the foundation are executed as per the directions of the governing council. He has been instrumental in developing an integrated model for rural livelihood, exploring new markets, as well as fostering key partnerships for market development for the beneficiaries in rural India. Thank you for joining us today, sir. Our second speaker today is Ms. Nidhi Pundir, Director of the HCL Foundation, the CSR arm of HCL Technologies. In this role, Ms. Nidhi provides direction to the global CSR agenda of the company. She has set up unique and scalable institutional mechanisms that maximize the utilization of corporate social responsibility provisions towards achieving sustainable development and thus positively transforming the lives of many. She has spent more than 22 years of her professional life in executing human rights of communities, their right to health, education, and livelihoods. Wonderful to have you join us,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Up next, we have Dr. Garima Dadich, Associate Professor and Head of SOBE, National Foundation of CSR, Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, CEO for IICA and DOI Government of Haryana. Dr. Garima has around 13 years of policy advocacy, academic, and development sector experience. She's an associate professor at Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, a think tank under the Ministry of Corporate Affairs at the Government of India. Currently, she is heading School of Business Environment, National Foundation for Corporate Social Responsibility, and Center for Business and Human Rights at IICA. Dr. Garima, pleasure to have you among us. Our final speaker for this panel is Ms. Mamta Carroll, Vice President and Regional Director, Asia at Smile Train. Ms. Carroll joined Smile Train in 2006, managing the largest program area, which is India. Currently, she manages South Asia, Southeast Asia, and MENA, comprising of 19 countries. She has led Smile Train's Asia team in extending both reach and impact, besides creating sustainable programs, strategic partnerships, and a deeper and broader integration of Smile Train's engagement with multiple stakeholders. Her earlier appointments have been with UNEP in Africa and tenure at New Delhi with the Center for Science and Environment. Thank you for being here with us, Ms. Carroll. I would like to once again remind all our panelists that this session runs till 11:30 a.m. Please do reserve some time at the end for Q&A, and I request our attendees to put all their questions in the Q&A box. There will also be a buzzer 5 minutes before the session is scheduled to end to act as a reminder. Over to you, Ms. Shankar.
Thank you, Yamini. Good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure of moderating the first panel discussion of the prestigious India CSR Summit on a topic the relevance of which is extremely high for everyone present for this summit. The changing nature of CSR and philanthropic projects, planning pathways for the post-COVID era. I would like to thank CSR Box, Mr. Bhaumik, and everybody on the on the team for us to have given this opportunity. While the panel just got introduced, having many decades of combined experience would emphasize the post-COVID era, very clearly all of us as CSR practitioners ourselves are planning and working towards the new requirements that COVID has thrown at us right in the thick of the pandemic. I represent Reckitt Benckiser India Private Limited. As most of you would be aware, our CSR focus has been on water sanitation and hygiene issues for the last few years. There's no denying the fact that this has always been a critical need and is very well aligned with not just SDG 6, water and sanitation, but also with SDG 3, health, SDG 4, education, SDG 5, gender, and SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. Our focus naturally continues to be the same even in the COVID context, quite naturally so. What has happened in this new context in general is that because of several rounds of national and local lockdowns leading to severe disruptions in economic activities, millions of people have lost their jobs. The focus of the philanthropies and CSR had to shift towards mitigating hunger for these large numbers who were walking back home not many months ago on foot and remained jobless for months together, getting trapped in the cycle of poverty. Feeding them, helping them survive was the highest priority and the most critical humanitarian call. The kitty in most cases is fixed, and to focus on a more primary need, one needs to forego some long term development commitment. Let us hear from an expert, Mr. Saurabh Singh, as to how this pandemic has impacted the CSR domain as a whole and also the CSR decisions. Mr. Singh, I want to ask specific questions to you, which you could cover through your speech, please. How has the COVID-19 as a pandemic impacted social sector projects? And do you see COVID-19 as an opportunity for the social sector to realign projects, rethink project design, and factor in uncertainties in the future, please?
Thank you very much. ICSR Foundation, being large in size, has the privilege of operating almost across the country. So, whatever I share is from my team of 600 people who are spread across the country, and whatever experiences we have had during this period. Now, before I get to practical experiences, there are a few observations I have about the situation in which we had the pandemic. So first thing is technology. Technology and connectivity were two things which were in existence, not as much in use. And this pandemic actually taught us that the connectivity and technology that is available with us can be put to better use. Now, whether that's social sector or real life commerce, it's true everywhere. But yes, even for social sector, it's very true. Apart from this, we saw large-scale migrations. So that simply shows that working condition in urban India is not very conducive, because at drop of the hat, people left urban India. At the same time, we have examples of several parts of the country where we had employers who were benevolent and who really took care of the people. Migrations have not happened. So it's primarily the living condition which is there for the migrant laborers. That somewhere needs to be addressed. Otherwise, such migrations can happen at drop of the hat, and the way we saw on television that it had picked up an unimaginable proportion, and no one could manage it. The next thing I would mention as a learning is that somewhere we need to segregate between philanthropy and CSR. I, as an individual, will participate in philanthropy. But my personal opinion when it comes to CSR, should CSR be focused more towards development or philanthropy? That's something I leave it open to everyone, will have different thought process. But my thought process is CSR is a responsibility of sustainable development for organizations, and majority of the focus of a CSR should be towards development activities in the similar segment and not just philanthropic activities. And the best example which comes to my mind is any kind of a calamity. Any calamity when disaster happens, there is relief work which is required, and then rehabilitation. So I see philanthropy more as a relief. I see CSR as a rehabilitation. And at least I'm able to, and I'm with my team able to segregate the two and keep it distinct so that we are focused on development activities and not get trapped by philanthropy only. The other thing which we observed during this period was a major collapse of rural supply chain. So what we saw that organizations which had a good supply chain could continue to supply, but the rural supply chain, which was from a village to the local market, which was 10 kilometers away or 20 kilometers away, had major disruptions. And because of the supply chain disruption, the rural population, the producers got lesser money and the urban consumers paid higher money. Now, this disruption is something which is a learning, and rural supply chains have to be sturdier. That's another area of focus which going forward, at least ICSF Foundation will look at it, and we are serious about studying this small scale rural supply chains and how rural storage and supply chain can be strengthened through CSR money. So those are my thoughts as of now.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Singh. What very interesting thoughts on drawing parallels between philanthropy and CSR and the relief and rehabilitation piece. And you very rightly pointed out the robust supply chain. We have seen it through the pandemic as to how companies with very robust supply chain have been able to survive through the pandemic. I'll move to the next panelist, please. The background to this entire thing is that as development practitioner, what I see and feel is that community mobilization happens to be a very, very important aspect. And I studied in an institution where we were taught community mobilization is the first piece. And I genuinely believe in the human to human connect, the relationship building aspect of the entire social project. But the pandemic is ushered in digital at a real great pace. We'll now go to Ms. Nidhi Pundir to see how digital pans out in social. I have the following specific questions for you, ma'am. How do you see the shift in the thematic priorities after 2020 in the context of CSR? And also, is this the moment for the social sector to go digital first, or are we overreacting at this stage?
Thank you so much, Tushara. And first of all, heartiest congratulations to the CSR box, Bhomik and the entire team. They have been on this mission for all these 6 years to bring the CSR fraternity together. And also, I would say the amount of emphasis they pay to research and development, that's very important. So the data that you collect and that you put out, much appreciated by all of us here. So thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, I'll take up your question, but before that, I just want to, emphasize with regards COVID-19 pandemic, essentially what did it do to us? I mean, there were 4 very clear, to our understanding, which kind of, I would say, shifts that happened in general across the globe. One was that we were pushed to use technology. I mean, not that technology did not exist, not that, innovations were not happening, but this was the era where very positively the world embraced technology. And I'm representing a brand that stands for technology. Essentially, there was so much appreciation for everything that existed, and that was very positive. I think the other big thing which happened was working together. So that is where partnerships came into play big way. Across, I would say, NGOs, government, individuals, corporates, whoever had, the gut, the spirit, and wanted to do something, because this was a pandemic which the world had never seen. This is something which none of us knew about how to deal with it. And what could have possibly helped us was this solidarity, and that is absolutely unquestionable. And that led to the third thing, that we also learned to trust and respect a lot, I would say. And I'm emphasizing on the word trust and respect, because there were these whole, I would say, negative connotations per se, uh, uh, including for the fifth estate, including for NGOs, including for government departments, and various CSR efforts that happen, that are they of use, are these government systems working, is the healthcare department doing anything. There were so many questions, police, be it in general, all kinds of negative impressions. But everything changed. Today, look at how we look at our police, how we look at our healthcare workers. I mean, they carried the world. Administrators, the DMs, they became heroes, and so did, I would say, the non-government organizations and the CSRs who were front-facing the pandemic and who are still front, you know, at the front. And I think the last big thing which has happened is, which is reiterated, I would say, and that at HCL Foundation we firmly believe, and we've been doing that way before the pandemic struck, is the systems strengthening approach. The whole belief. At times, one pre-COVID, there were certain questions that we used to face in terms of that why invest in the existing system, why don't we run something parallel, why don't we open more hospitals, why don't we open more schools, why do we, and state system could be defunct and so on. But see how wrong those notions have been proven, that unless we invest in the state systems and also take the human rights approach to it, any pandemic of this sort or any disaster of this kind can actually take away services, and nothing will exist. So it's important that we actually sit on a very strong system. Essentially, yes, digital world seems to be becoming a new reality, but I would caution that when it comes to two, or let's say three aspects, or even four on which we work at HCL Foundation: education, health, skill development and livelihood, and environment. So starting from the last, I mean, while technology will help us map, help us count our efforts, it is something that has to be done with our own hands. Somebody would need to plant the trees, clean the ponds, dig them out. We can use machines, we can use, but there is this whole thing about human action which will be needed. So there's no replacement happening, only complementing the effort, only having a stronger MIS around it, having maybe technology to map water, green canopy cover, census of various kind of flora and fauna. Yes, that is definitely something, but we are not saying that digitalization or technology can ever replace human action, the volunteering spirit behind it, through which we can conserve the planet. And there's a very high need for that. And pandemic has again shown us that somewhere, emerging viruses are also a result of fast climate change and action, and human action by hands is required for that. Similarly, skill development and livelihood, while a lot can happen through technology, but think about indigenous or traditional trades, craft, art, culture needs to be conserved. I mean, let's not talk about either technology or that. Let's talk about a world where everything exists, where we build on what we already have. What technology will do for them is, yes, provide them better platform, better connectivity, better reach, and so on and so forth. Coming to healthcare, I mean, how can we even replace ever the nursing care and the medical doctors care? Which, I mean, yes, telemedicine, all kinds of facilities, but eventually the hand of care is needed. I mean, that's what heals. So, and rather more needed, especially in the current times. And we saw how some of our partners were right there, teams were right there, be it relief material distribution, be it taking care of sick patients. And in India, we have actually set an example of taking care of COVID patients and not abandoning them. That's something which has happened, including through our own CSR efforts. Education. Children are having a tough time. I mean, the toughest times this pandemic has given is to the young people. While we have been able to manage for very few, I would say, digital platforms, but most of them really don't have access. And even if they had access to digital platforms, the interpersonal connect between the teacher and the student is critical to bring about transformation. And then think about sports, think about art, think about so many of those things. So various forms of technology will be there, but world would need to, I would say, open up. So I don't really see in a very big way that everything, I think it's just about finding a cure and finding some kind of protection against the new virus, the novel coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's not about that we are completely shifting away. Rather, we reiterated our focus, and not even 1 rupee was shifted from regular development projects at HCL Foundation towards relief material or towards just responding to the pandemic. I mean, we as a corporate are committed, and we have, I would say, responded, but a separate fund was created for that. HCL company came together, they provided the technology platform, and a separate COVID-19 fund was created at the level of founders without touching the commitment towards the regular development projects. We clearly know that reproductive health programs were important, education was important, regular skill development was important, nothing was less important, growing trees was important, cleaning ponds was important. So we are very fortunate to have the right kind of partnerships, both with government and non-government, which were established way before the pandemic struck. We continued. I think lockdown was which was coming in the way, because we did get permissions on ground to continue to work because of very cordial relationship with the administration. Then they understood that if HCL Foundation and its partners are working on the preventive healthcare issues, at least children are getting the nutrition, they are getting, parents are getting contraceptive supplies and family planning counseling. Children, I mean, one of our projects that works in urban areas is Uday, which is basically focused on the migrants and the population living in slums. First and foremost, our I would say priority was to touch base with our 400,000 beneficiaries, and that's where I would say technology did come handy in a big way, because we had a very robust MIS already. And within 2 months, because they were all moving back to their rural areas, and we were like, our community has shifted, but how do we continue providing the similar kind of, how do we connect back with them? And that was something that was done through a very extensive beneficiary survey that we launched immediately. So it was just about a matter of re-engineering till the time COVID pandemic is an emergency and we are facing the disaster, to rather than regular education, do education in emergencies, rather than health, to health in emergencies, rather than skill. So everything takes an emergencies mode. And some of us who have worked in disasters, and we know the disaster risk response, rehabilitation, and then build back strategies. Same philosophy and the same principles and same strategies, actions have been applied to it. We sincerely hope world will come back to normalcy, and we will be able to use technology in most effective ways, but not replace it for human interaction. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Pundir, for your very interesting thoughts. And trust and respect, as you rightly said, seems to have really gone up amongst, in every context, be it for the community work, the projects that we do with our colleagues and everything, that this has shown us a new phase probably in our lives, working lives in general. Systems strengthening approach that you've used clearly seems to be the way to go. And yeah, you are right. We cannot replace human with digital and make digital work for the human cause in a far, far better way. Thank you so much for that. We have an academician between us representing the government on our panel. Some questions I have for you, ma'am, are specific to what CSR and philanthropic fraternity may want to know and also understand from you. Is what do you think, in your mind, what type of new funding and program models can emerge from this pandemic, which can shape or reshape the social sector in the next 3 to 4 years? Uh, Also, Dr. Garima, I would like to ask you, from a government perspective, I understand you see CSR as a self-regulating business model. So would you see the changed priorities to be aligned with the government priorities? Is government likely to come up with any policy amendments, etc.?
Right. Thank you, Trishara. Thank you very much. And again, at the outset, I would also like to thank CSR Box and Mr. Bhaumik Shah for such a wonderful initiative to bring all stakeholders together on one platform. So thank you to him as well. And thank you for inviting me in this panel, most learned and honorable panel members I have. I would like to, touching on the two questions posed, I would like to first begin that, we all know what CSR is, and that is something has an important mechanism for furthering the economic and social development goals, particularly in developing countries. So not going in detail about the definition, but certainly when the current pandemic began, a question arose that whether CSR can bear the weight of this increasing expectations, being heaped on the shoulders of corporations. And as we have noticed, through the corporation's contribution and the project programs, that it has been proved that it can surely bear that particular weight and contribute to society. Now, when we say that, CSR initiatives, we know that it is the best way to contribute to the society and its people. Through local or national charitable contribution, businesses have helped the society. So we all agree to this. Corporations are also increasingly seen as reliable partners that mobilize resources and voluntarily comply with the new standards which has been set up. Now, as very rightly mentioned by the Tushara, that CSR is a self-regulating business model. This is something I greatly advocate by mentioning that when we say that CSR is a self-regulating business model, that implies the procedures of interaction by a company with its stakeholders and the general public at large, creating a scenario of being socially responsible. So this is something I wanted to make these statements. Now coming to the planning the pathways for post-COVID era and what exactly has changed. Here I would like to say that the current pandemic has tremendously disrupted the socio-economic circumstances of the whole world. But most of the companies in Indian economy are playing a significant role in creating the awareness of social distancing as an aid to mitigate the spread of this deadly infection, COVID-19. And here a more optimistic view is that that COVID-19 pandemic will accelerate post-pandemic CSR development in the long run. How? That today, more and more firms and businesses, they are realizing that their long-term survival and development, that is, hinges on achieving a very delicate balance between the profitability and harmony with its various stakeholders. And how this balance can be, maintained. One example, recent initiatives which have been designed by the corporates, where a crisis communication strategy and a stakeholder management approach is taken up in the CSR. So it's something like communicating with the beneficiaries early and, often, more often, engaging with the critical implementation agencies, remaining directly in contact with government stakeholders at the district level. That has also one of the very important points. And probably the more relevant and the pressing question is not about whether to invest in CSR or not. Today, the question is more about how to invest in CSR to achieve the mutually beneficial and interdependent socio-economic and environmental goals, right? Again, here I can mention that, as an example, that supporting the smallholder farmers by providing free agriculture input kits, developing apps to track and mitigate COVID crisis, and we can see a lot of digital, movements happening, providing the frontline workers with adequate kits, uh, distributing the ration kits, food packets to the marginalized and the migrant workers, also funding innovations under the technology incubators. So these are some of the examples which the corporates are thinking, and that will also come as a post pandemic also. Further, touching on the point that the government perspective. So we know that government has declared this particular coronavirus outbreak as SDRF, which means that even the state governments can mobilize resources from the State Disaster Response Fund. And then subsequently, MCA has clarified the spending of funds for COVID-19 would be a permissible activity under CSR. So MCA advised that the activities should be interpreted liberally. So that's very important. The government intent is that it should be interpreted liberally to capture the essence of the activities permitted under this particular schedule. So therefore, then we all have also seen that the government has set up the Prime Minister Citizen Assistance and Relief in Emergency Situation Fund, which is popularly known as PM CARES, to respond to the COVID-19 crisis and provide relief to those affected. Then Schedule 7 has been also amended to include PM CARE as a CSR along with the PM National Relief Fund. So these were the few changes which we all are aware. So the top, strategy for companies for COVID-19 related projects had been to invest in projects and initiatives which is driven by social welfare through the identification of the direct beneficiaries. This is something I'm categorically highlighting. And definitely the geographical proximity has also been seen as a favorable option, because organizations look to rebuild and provide assistance domestically and locally first, and that is also very much the law says the preference should be given to them. Briefly touching about that how this pandemic has led companies pivoting their CSR priorities to address more pertinent social issues. Here I would like to also mention that on 26th August 2020, the government has amended the CSR norms to include research and development. So again, this is very critical, which now in these current pandemic, it can include spending on the new vaccines, drugs, medical devices related to any COVID-19. Any company engaged in research and development activity of these new vaccine, drugs, and medical devices in their normal course of business may undertake R&D activity of such particular issues for financial year 2021 and 2022-23 also. So this particular step, what I'm trying to highlight is, it is expected that this will enhance manyfold the flow of funds towards the COVID-19 fight through vaccine or through the research and the drug development, basically. So this will create many opportunities for social sector in research as well as project designing of CSR intervention. Quickly, I would like to mention a few more points is about, mentioning that some corporates have also creatively deployed their funds towards initiatives which is aligned with unconventional areas of relief, such as promoting mental health, harnessing technology to create awareness. So all these things, I can say that, in the long term, it is very much critical for any corporation to ensure even their long-term sustainability in the times of, these pandemic. So briefly, I'll just like to sum up here by saying that, although the full impact of COVID-19 is yet to be determined, based on the various theoretical perspectives, it can be proposed that firms with a better CSR profile will perform better during such unexpected shocks or pandemic compared to those with not having so good CSR profile. And at the end, I would also like to say from the government's perspective, always the government is very clear about, highlighting this being again, board-driven agenda, which is very much described in the law also. So it is about a self-regulating business model. So here I would like to close, and maybe later I can take up the questions as well. Thank you, Trisha.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Dadich. This was very insightful. Also, this whole how the profitability and stakeholder priorities are very linked. Absolutely, a lot of companies already agreed with us with that before the pandemic as well. But this is kind of really brought the entire dependence on what is happening around you beyond the business, and how you need to prioritize all that and bring about a balance is really would help push the sustainability agenda forward. Absolutely. COVID-19 as a disaster, being taken up as a disaster and giving guidelines on corporates to be able to spend on COVID-19 I think has really helped the entire social development agenda, and take care of some of the real immediate priorities at that point in time when the pandemic had just set in and people didn't exactly know which way to go. So all
Right.
these things have really helped, ma'am. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your thoughts. I would, last but certainly not the least, we have the representative of a very reputed nonprofit, Smile Train, Ms. Mamta Carroll. Ma'am, I want to ask a couple of questions to you as well. You are the only representative on the panel from the nonprofit side. So it's very important for us to hear from you as to what do you think specifically philanthropies and social organizations who are dependent on external funding, how do you think this pandemic has affected you as an organization? Also, you are a specific cause bound organization. You are something an organization that works on cleft lips. So I mean, there could be people who would be looking into, then say that, oh, but the current priority is helping so and so and so, and because we know how the priorities seem to have really emerged in a very different way. So how do you deal with these kind of concerns, and what is your overall thinking in this perspective is what I want to understand.
So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the wonderful opportunity for Smile Train and for the cause of clefts for us to appear here and talk to everybody today. Definitely, yes, Tushara. I think all my co-panelists did mention, the impact of COVID-19 from a very different project perspective as far as CSR is concerned and what the priority should be. I'm here to talk about specifically, as you said, the cause of clefts. And yes, we are a medical charity, and to agree with Dr. Dadich, who just gave a presentation, a fantastic talk on the impact of the initiatives from the government's perspective, that this is a charity which has a direct social benefit for the beneficiary. So whatever I'm going to talk about will is because we work one-on-one with the beneficiary directly. So it's a project which is like really linked to this one cause. And definitely I'm going to talk about specifically how it has affected us and what plans do we have. moving forward from as we go beyond the pandemic. So I would like to share my screen and show you a very small and a very brief presentation. And I hope everyone can see this.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So yeah, so I think let me see. Yeah, so I think which everyone spoke about how the COVID-19 has really impacted all of the areas. And I think there is a common perspective when we talk about COVID-19, and it has altered life as we knew it. I mean, we took so many things for granted, but we've come to realize over the past few months that life is definitely much more than just doing a normal stuff. And it is estimated that 150 million people are at the risk of falling into extreme poverty by the end of 2021. A number of people are actually, in terms of malnourishment and undernourishment, it will probably, unfortunately, increase by up to 132 million by the end of next year. There are four major things or four major challenges, which has been a fallout of the impact of COVID-19, which is access to child and maternal health. Those services definitely have been hampered. We have such wonderful programs, as Dr. Daljeet said, under the Prime Minister's Fund and the Prime Minister's program and the general health coverage that we have in the country. But all of them, specifically, I'm talking about programs for expecting mothers and children, have been really, really affected, and they remain, the benefits to the direct beneficiary has remained low the past few months. There has been a decrease, rightly so, in the attendance of the outpatient patients, and people are not coming to hospitals, obviously, because they have been told not to, and there's a huge risk of about contracting COVID-19, and therefore definitely the general healthcare facilities at our partner hospitals and other hospitals have really taken a decline. Most surgeries have been postponed, despite some surgeries which are the MENTS, which is the medically essential and essential time-sensitive surgeries. So certain surgeries can wait, but certain surgeries, if they are prolonged beyond a period of time, will have a huge impact on the person's quality of life, whether it's the functioning or whether it's the way people, the entire psychological and the mental makeup of a person. Okay, this is just to give you an overview of what the problem is. I mean, as I've said, that we are a charity which is focused primarily on just one cause, very, very specific, very focused on clefts. But not many people know that 81% of cleft lips and cleft, usually a cleft can be diagnosed in as early as 20 weeks of pregnancy. And when we talk about the sheer numbers for our country, 35,000 children are born every year. New kids are born every year in our country because of clefts. I mean, with having clefts. One in the usual, the estimate is that 1 in 700 is born with a cleft. And I'm sure most of you know that children born with clefts have a problem to eat, to basically breathe, and even the basic things that we as normal human beings take for granted, those basic functions are basically affected when a child is born with cleft. The ideal age for surgery is 3 to 6 months for a cleft lip and 6 to 12 months for a cleft palate. This is just to give you an idea of the programmatic spread of Smile Train. Smile Train in India is about a 20-year-old program. We've done we've supported more than 6 lakh surgeries since we started through a network of 150 partner hospitals, and we work with almost like 300 doctors, both surgeons and anesthetists, and orthodontists and speech therapists and so on. So coming specifically to COVID-19 and what our response has been, as everyone spoke, Dr. Dalit spoke about a crisis management, but remember that this kind of really struck everyone and caught everyone unawares. So to now, obviously the learning is to have a crisis management plan, but at that time to kind of really respond very quickly on how to take your programs forward and how to basically get everyone together was a huge challenge. And definitely Smile Train was not different from this. And what we basically did is the kind of facilities or the kind of work that we do in person, we had to move most of it or some of it online and using technology. So yes, how most of our surgeries were suspended, as I said, but just to keep just to focus on other things, because Smile Train also sponsors training. So what we did was to started focusing more on training. We started holding webinars, we started holding learning opportunities, not only for the doctors, but also for the speech pathologists, for orthodontists, and for nutritionists. So we started doing those. We also supported some of our partner hospitals who were working despite the pandemic, because those areas were open, they were not that affected, and there were no lockdowns in those areas. Those areas were supposedly the green zones, and therefore we supported them with COVID testing. We would give financial assistance for PPEs to basically enhance more and more safety, if at all those medically essential time-sensitive surgeries were taking place. Smile Train beefed up our financial assistance to hospitals, and we came up to do this. The other thing which is very heartening and which really worked very well is to establish or to enhance our cleft toll-free helpline. So this helpline would, usually when we have our office and when everything is fine, then it is basically stationed in the office. But how did we quickly respond to making this accessible to everybody? Because this was the time when people were not basically going in person to hospitals. So how could the parent or the poor child or somebody who really knew a cleft patient, how would people reach out to help to Smile Train for help? This was essential to basically build that and to have this in place. The others, as my panelists also spoke about, and Nidhi spoke about technology and how definitely stressing on the fact that technology should not replace that human element and both of them should work in tandem. Yes, definitely. We did have both these, both the mediums in place, where you did have like a technology to support whether speech or doing training programs or just talking to the mothers and teaching them how to feed their children, or just via tele speech giving that first consultation or giving that first, but also following up with personal visits of, say, like an outreach worker who would really go to that person and basically talk to them and tell them the next steps and tell them to kind of hold on for some time. So I think both of them worked really well. The other thing, as I said, that Smile Train is an organization which not only imparts that cleft surgery, but we also very, very heavily into training of medical professionals. And we recently actually partnered or had a collaboration with Similar Medical, where there is a specific device of simulator technology, which is used to train surgeons. So yes, if the partner hospitals are working at 40% or 50%, workload in this time, so to utilize that time to basically focus on further training in surgery and anesthesia, that we felt was the way to go. The most important, I think everyone spoke about it, is how, there are certain lessons that we've learned. The COVID-19 pandemic has firmly established the need for very, very active and cohesive action, and the establishment of a robust, collaborative, scalable, and agile healthcare model. Thus, the future requires strengthening the entire existing system, filling in the gaps and pivoting or scaling up successful models. And I think the three pillars that we feel are really, really important is one definitely is awareness, capacity building, and new CSR best practices, creating measurable goals and supportive ecosystems with multiple stakeholders, creating a direct impact or a direct establishment or a direct connection with the beneficiary, so that the resources which are available, the scarce resources which are available today, are going directly for the benefit of the program itself. Another important, leg of responding and life after COVID-19 definitely is collaborating with the government for scale and prevention and optimal response. The government, with its huge scalable model, definitely for my sector, for the development sector, for charities like us, partnering with the government network is absolutely essential to reach to those back or beyond places, to reach the beneficiary and to reach the entire community and offer the service there. Leveraging technology, yes, through telehealth practices, to basically using, because today India is like very, very well networked, to basically leverage that not only for education but to deliver that essential service to the beneficiary. I think that's the most important. And bridging the rural urban gap, promoting digital solutions to basically achieve whatever we've set out to do. And lastly, I think together we aim to create an inclusive healthcare ecosystem in the coming years by applying some of the key learnings from the past to revamp our approach towards CSR and philanthropy. So thank you very much, and thank you all the panelists. Thank you CSR Box for this opportunity to us. Thank you, Tushara.
Thank you, Ms. Carol. It was really nice to hear how Smile Train has been navigating through the COVID challenges. And with the kind of organization you're a large organization. I can only imagine what the smaller organizations, smaller nonprofits would have been going through. I think we are close to the end of the session, so I would not take any additional time and see if there are any questions to be answered. There are quite a few in the chat box, but I do not know how many we would be able to attend. I'll just attempt a couple of them from there, and then we'll go ahead and close the session with your permission, Yamini.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah. So there's a specific question to Dr. Dadhich. Ms. Devi Keluskar, Mr. Miss, I'm unsure, I'm sorry, is asking how do, just a minute. Yeah. I'm sorry, I have missed that question. Yamini, I hope you'll be able to help me
I'm
with
sorry,
this.
actually, I was trying to type and I think I have just clicked on done. So I read the question. So
all right,
with your permission, I'll just try to attempt the question. So the question is about that, when there is too much of funding going into PM Care Fund, how to, raise funds basically. So I would just like to mention that, certainly while the government PM Care Fund has witnessed monumental support from corporates, but some companies have also contributed by individual programs and relief efforts. And some have also partnered with local authorities of the respective state government to donate medical or the food supplies or to scale other initiatives to cater the needs of the local communities. So what I would like to mention that there is no one size fits all approach towards CSR. And discussing, a firm's social, environment, ethical, and the philanthropic responsibilities is contextually dependent and multidimensional by nature. So certainly there are organizations, there are projects, programs going on. And again, this has a direct connection with, CSR being a self-regulating model. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Dadich. Nidhi, there's a specific question for you which says, with climate change and less climate mitigation measures, is the way ahead to develop this beneficiary survey for better feedback on what is needed on ground?
No, definitely. I think those aspects, at least the survey that we have been doing, and we always keep doing very robust baselines. And the entire CSR strategy at HCL Foundation is guided, I would say, it's not something which we just create without taking, the real ground assessment. And it's obviously technology driven assessments, as well as the reports that government comes out. We also do our own independent surveys. And essentially, there's a lot, but I would re-emphasize the fact that a lot of action is needed. I mean, it's not about, see, we have best of the policies in our country. We are a signatory to the to the I mean, there are a whole lot of conventions out there which we have committed ourselves to, but individual action will define the change. I mean, are we planting at least one native species tree around where we live? Are we watering it? Are we actually ensuring their survival? Are we, as citizens of this country, taking enough action? I mean, I'm just giving you a quick example. When we did the pond survey in Gautam Budh Nagar, one district, I mean, and similar surveys were repeated in each district where we have presence, there were 1,700 water bodies discovered. And this was a technology led survey. And when we actually had a discussion with the revenue department here, and this all happened, I would say, this was further reiterated when Jal Shakti Abhiyan was launched. At least we had a ready survey available with us. And when Jal Shakti Abhiyan came, immediately we re-emphasized to the district administration that can you help us, and we will provide the resources, but we want all these ponds to be notified in the revenue records. And immediately the local patwaris participated, and that's where a comment came that how important it is for us to work together as one team and forget that we represent government, or we represent CSR, or we represent NGOs, or we are individuals, but come together for a cause as a citizens charter. I think that is what will define the next how our planet will be. And eventually today we have 1,000 ponds already notified in revenue department's records of this district, of which we are developing 60, 70 as model ponds. Other CSRs are coming forward. We are sharing the technology, we're sharing the source code out there, which is one of our missions also, to share the source code. And I'm very sure that within 2 or 3 years time we would have developed most of these ponds, and we would want them to actually notify all 1,700 eventually. So climate action is about action, is about citizens action, surely.
Thanks, Nidhi. One question for Mr. Saurabh Singh. What's your opinion and experience in microfinance lending by ICICI? It's a very interesting question. Who is the benefit receiver, bank or the community?
On a CSR forum, I don't think so I should be commenting on business. See, microfinance is a business proposition which is required for the country, and it's a very expensive way to reach out to the community. I would say is every bank and COVID learning on how digitally these can be handled in a far more efficient manner. So I know people have worries on cost of loan in rural India, which is higher than urban India, but that's the cost of reach. So I mean, it's a fact that rural India pays higher price for every product, FMCG product or durables. Every product they pay a higher price than urban India. That's a fact. But I think all organizations are trying to go more digital on building efficiencies and how these things can be delivered at a lower cost or at a similar cost like urban India.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Ma'am, there's one quick question for you, Dr. Dadich. when can we expect enactment of the draft CSR Rules Amendment 2020?
That's a question which I'm sorry I will not be able to answer because it's completely, between the corridors of Shastri Bhavan. So, yeah.
Sure. Thanks. Yamini, I think our time is up. Let me know if you want me to take up any more questions or stop here.
Ma'am, I think we can take one or two questions till 11:40.
Okay, right. So this is an open question. Please request any of the panelists to answer, please. Uh, with so much stress on robust CSR profile and technology and MIS, does this signify at the end of the small? Does this signify the end of the small grassroots NGOs and the future for big organizations with large structures?
Okay, I'll take that. This whole thing about small and big, honestly, in fact, we were having a very fair discussion yesterday in our team, and there's a very small NGO that wanted to do some environment work, which applied. And obviously, the governance questions come up, whether they'll be able to manage this much of funding, whether they'll have enough papers, which the ministry always asks, so on and so forth. But some of us who work directly with all I would say sizes of non-government organizations, we know that everybody should be able to start somewhere, and if the fundamentals are there and if they are fitting within the larger strategy and or let's say the call for action, which we come up with. Obviously, each corporate will have their own priorities and their own frameworks, and if one fits there, um, I don't think size of the organization in terms of budgets or human resource comes in the way of maintaining a strong MIS, maintaining a very strong governance structure. In fact, we are running a course on HCL Foundation Academy in partnership with IIM Bangalore, where we are discussing governance, where we are looking at why and how, and it's important to maintain a strong governance structure. So we always say the size can be as small as possible, but the foundation should be strong. And that is not the definition of small or big. Big or small, we have to follow, certain regulations quite categorically and maintain our MIS in a way where the connect with the beneficiary, directly we are able to connect with the beneficiary. That's critical, or directly be able to count the environmental impact, and that is away from that doesn't compare anywhere in the definition of small and big. I mean, those are fundamentals.
Thank you, Nidhi. I completely agree with you. Typically with complex due diligence processes for a lot of corporate organizations, smaller NGOs do find it challenging to navigate through these, complex channels to secure funding towards the end. So what corporates could do and should try to do, like Nidhi has already said, that, help the organizations, help build their capacities also in the process of engaging with them, for them to be able to secure funds from other organizations to become more sustainable. And certainly it's not Bhaumik's presentation showed that a lot of funding is going towards grassroots organizations, and a lot of corporates are really willing to work on ground because they understand the direct implementers can only be those who are connected with the communities. So that's not uh, that big a worry, and I'm sure with great commitments and passions, all the organizations would be able to secure funding for the cause that they stand for. One last question here is, given the economic prospects affected and corporations seeing lesser profits at the end of the current financial year, the next year is difficult year for CSR in terms of resources to be allocated. What is MCA thinking on these? I think, ma'am, Dr. Dadish, this is directed at you again. Any changes expected in terms of qualifying norms for corporations or the percentage of profits to be allocated to CSR?
Yeah. So, with reference to the change in percentage of profits, there is no such change. And I'm just referring to the high level committee report, which was released in the last 2018 end or 2019 beginning. So in that, this issue has been deliberated in detail, and it was recommended that there is no change with reference to the percentage of profits to be allocated to CSR. Further, with reference to the changes in terms of qualifying norms for corporation, also the initial idea was to extend to the more companies. But again, this issue has been deliberated, and as such, there is no such change for qualifying norms. But subsequently, definitely, this will include more, companies. But the government is very, cautious about the fact that business of business is to make profit also, and then only it can move forward to the social development sector also. However, in the terms of a larger scope of a responsible business conduct, there are certain, another set of guidelines or the recommendations are there which the organizations has to follow. So to answer this question directly, there's no such change, but from a different perspective, certainly the government is expecting a lot from corporates to adopt certain voluntary recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dadish. With that, I think we have come to an end of our allotted time. I would like to thank all the experienced panelists for giving the insights in the session and making it useful for the summit. Thank you very much.